My name is Marcus Bell, and for 12 years, I thought I had built something solid, unshakable. Camille and I had been inseparable since we were 17. We'd built a life, a family, a home from the ground up. Our kids, Ari and Jonas, filled our days with laughter and chaos. My job as a regional supervisor wasn't glamorous, but it paid well, gave us stability, let Camille focus on the kids and her small photography side gig. We had routines: Friday pizza night, Saturday park runs, Sunday pancakes. I genuinely believed we were happy. I genuinely believed I was safe. That belief shattered on a Thursday afternoon. I remember it in painful clarity, the way Camille stood in the living room, her arms crossed, her phone in her hand like a weapon. I had just walked in, smelling like mulch and sweat from a site inspection. I was exhausted, ready for a shower and a hug from the kids. Instead, Camille's eyes met mine, flat and unreadable. "We need to talk," she said, calm, too calm. I smirked, wiped my brow. "Can it wait till after I scrub off this 10-hour day?" "No," she said. "Who is she, Marcus?" I laughed. I actually laughed, because it was so far from anything real. "Who's who?" She didn't blink, just tapped her screen and turned the phone around. Text messages lit the display. Words between someone labeled Marcus and a woman named Lila. Filthy stuff. Descriptive. Intimate. "That's not me," I said immediately. "Camille, you know that's not me. You're saying these are fake?" "Completely. Look at the grammar. I don't even text like this." But she wasn't listening. She was recording. I noticed her other hand, slightly behind her back, holding another phone. Red light blinking. My stomach dropped. "Are you recording me?" She didn't answer. Just narrowed her eyes and said, "So you denied cheating on me with Lila Davis?" Lila Davis? That name didn't even sound familiar. I stared at her, stunned, waiting for her face to crack into a grin, for her to say it was all some sick joke. But Camille didn't laugh. Instead, she nodded like she confirmed something for herself, turned off the recording, and walked past me. By that night, she had kicked me out. I didn't even get to pack properly. She'd already called her cousin Deja to help escort me out. I slept in my car for 2 nights, too stunned to call anyone, too angry to cry. I texted Camille over and over, asking where this had come from, begging her to at least let me explain to the kids. No response. 2 days later, a knock on my car window came as I dozed off in a supermarket parking lot. A man in a suit handed me a folded document, restraining order, filed by Camille Bell. Claimed I was unstable. Claimed she had evidence I might be a threat. I wasn't allowed within 100 feet of the house. I wasn't allowed to contact her directly. That weekend, my sister called me. "Camille told everyone you cheated," she said, her voice strained. She sent screenshots to the family group chat. "What screenshots?" I asked, voice cracking. "You know I didn't." "They look real, Marcus. Like, really real." I sat there in my car, phone pressed to my ear feeling thin. It wasn't just Camille. It was everyone. She was laying the groundwork for something bigger, and I was already 2 steps behind. Within the week, my boss called me into HR. He avoided eye contact as he shifted in his seat. "Marcus, look, I know it's personal, but there's talk. Domestic stuff. A few of the board members are concerned. We're gonna have to let you go, at least temporarily." "Temporarily?" I echoed. "Over a rumor?" He sighed. "It's not personal. We just can't take risks." I walked out of that office stripped of everything I'd worked for. Just like that. Tarek, my best friend since middle school, offered me a space in his garage. Not the guest room. His wife wasn't comfortable with that. But the garage. No insulation. A cot, a mini fridge, and the quiet, suffocating buzz of a man who had been erased from his own life. I stared at the ceiling every night and replayed everything. What did I miss? When did the switch flip in Camille's mind? Had I been too busy working, too trusting, too blind? The hardest part was trying to explain it all to Ari and Jonas. We had a supervised visit arranged, 2 hours at a sterile family center with a caseworker watching us like I might snap and hurl Legos across the room. Ari barely looked at me. Jonas clung to his Game Boy, barely speaking. I knelt in front of them, hands trembling, trying to find words I didn't have. "Daddy didn't do the things people are saying. I love you. I always will." Ari finally whispered, "Why don't you live with us anymore?" I couldn't answer. Not in a way that made sense to an 11-year-old. When the visit ended, they were pulled away by a social worker, and I watched my kids walk out of the room like strangers. That's when it hit me fully, not just the betrayal, but the theft. Camille hadn't just lied. She had stolen the life we built together, and made sure I couldn't get near it again. 12 years. 12 years of shared dreams, inside jokes, bedtime stories, quiet mornings with coffee and kisses. And she tossed them away like nothing. 12 years meant nothing to her. But they meant everything to me. And I wasn't going to let her rewrite the ending. I used to believe that if you were honest and hardworking, the truth would protect you. That was the kind of man I tried to be, on time, dependable, family first. But the courtroom doesn't care about the truth. It cares about who cries better, who paints the more tragic picture, who builds the strongest illusion. And Camille? She was no longer my wife, she was a tactician with a plan. The moment I received the court summons for full custody, I knew she was going for the jugular. But I still didn't believe she'd lie about the kids. Not Camille. Not the same woman who used to leave notes in my lunchbox or call me crying when Jonas scraped his knee. I told myself maybe this was just a tactic, just something to push me into settling fast. I was wrong. In her affidavit, Camille wrote that I had emotionally neglected the kids, that I was distant, that I isolated in the garage after work and didn't engage. She said I used harsh language, claimed the kids were afraid to speak up around me. She added that I had developed a gambling problem and implied our financial strain was due to my supposed addiction. She even named Rosa Mendez, our nosy neighbor, as a witness who had observed Marcus bringing women into the house when Camille was out. When I read that, I laughed out loud. Then I nearly threw the papers across the garage. Rosa? The same woman who used to leave notes about our lawn being too wild, and who once called the HOA because our recycling bin was out too early? Of course she backed Camille. That woman hated my guts from the day we moved in. But laughing didn't change the fact that in court, Camille looked like a victim, and I looked like a headline waiting to happen. The hearing was short, brutal. Camille sat with her lawyer, Silas Vaughn, who dressed like he was auditioning for a courtroom drama, all polished confidence and smug smirks. He called me a man under pressure, emotionally volatile, a potential threat to the emotional well-being of the children. I wasn't allowed to react. I had to sit there, mute, while a stranger rewrote my life in front of a judge who barely made eye contact. Camille cried on cue. She spoke softly, dressed modestly, called me Marcus like we were still friends. She said things like, "He used to be a good father, Your Honor, but something changed." She submitted screenshots of online gambling sites, a fabricated spreadsheet of lost money. I tried to speak up, tried to explain, but my court-appointed lawyer put a hand on my arm, whispered, "Let it go for now." Let it go? How do you let go of your life being torched in front of you? I lost everything that day. The judge awarded Camille temporary full custody, allowed her to remain in the home, and issued a no-contact clause unless communication was facilitated through attorneys. The restraining order stayed in place. And within a few weeks, word of the court case reached my company. HR didn't even call me in for a second meeting this time. Just a cold email. In light of recent developments, we are terminating your employment effective immediately. Apparently, someone had forwarded the custody hearing transcript to my regional director. I knew Camille didn't do it directly. She was smarter than that. But someone wanted me completely shut out, and they'd succeeded. I remember standing outside Tarek's house, holding that email on my phone, staring at it like it was in another language. My whole career gone because of rumors, because of a lie wrapped in a sob story. I walked into the garage, closed the door behind me, and just sat on the cot, numb. Tarek came out with a beer. "You want to talk about it?" "No," I said. "Talking doesn't fix it." He nodded, sat next to me in silence. That's the kind of friend he was, not loud, not intrusive, just present. And for the first time since this all began, I let the silence settle without rushing to fill it. But it was hard not to feel like a ghost. Everything I had built, brick by brick over 12 years, had been turned against me. My house, my job, my kids, even my name. Camille had weaponized my identity and molded me into a monster I didn't recognize. I stared at old photos on my phone, the ones I hadn't had the heart to delete. Ari at the zoo, holding my hand. Jonas asleep in my lap during a movie. Camille with flour on her nose, baking cookies while dancing to Whitney Houston in the kitchen. Were all those moments real? Or had she been pretending this whole time? I kept replaying everything, hunting for the moment it all turned. Was it something I said? Did? Was she always capable of this? Or had she changed somewhere along the way, and I was too blind, too trusting to notice? It didn't matter now. The walls had collapsed, and I was standing in the wreckage. But there was something stubborn in me that refused to go quiet. A flicker, maybe. A grit in my chest that whispered, this isn't the end. Camille might have torn the foundation apart, She might have won the first round, but the house wasn't the man. The job wasn't the father. And the courtroom wasn't the final say. She took my life. I would build another. And this time, I'd make damn sure it couldn't be burned down again. Rock bottom doesn't come all at once. It arrives in pieces. A slow, bitter unraveling. I used to think losing the house, the job, and custody was the lowest I could sink. But rock bottom is quieter than you think. It's waking up on a cot in someone else's garage with your breath visible because there's no insulation. It's checking your phone for messages you know won't come. It's realizing you've been erased from your children's daily lives like a smudge wiped clean from a glass frame. The first few weeks after the court ruling were a blur of court dates, cold showers, and odd jobs. I found work wherever I could, loading trucks at a warehouse, pulling weeds in strangers' backyards, moving furniture for people who didn't care that my back was still sore from the last job. I did what I had to. Pride? That left when Camille changed the locks. Money was tight. I kept receipts for everything, tried to track my spending. I ate whatever was cheap: ramen, canned soup, gas station sandwiches. Once, Tarek offered to spot me for a week, but I refused. I'd already taken up his garage. I wasn't about to take his money too. I still had some dignity, though it clung by a thread. The supervised visits with Ari and Jonas were the only things that mattered. And even those were rationed like wartime supplies, just 2 visits in 6 months. I remember every second of those hours like they were gold. Ari had grown taller, and Jonas's front teeth were gone. They looked older, more distant. Like I was someone they'd seen in a dream once, blurry and unreliable. They didn't run into my arms. They didn't call me Dad, with that spark in their eyes. They sat stiffly on the opposite side of a brightly colored table, the caseworker sitting nearby with a clipboard. I brought them little gifts, a puzzle Jonas had loved once, a drawing set for Ari. They smiled politely, but their eyes stayed cautious. "Mom says you're sick," Jonas whispered once. My heart cracked. "Sick how?" I asked. "She says you don't know how to love us right." I swallowed so hard it hurt. "That's not true, buddy." He looked down, coloring in quiet lines. Ari didn't say anything for the rest of the visit. I walked out of the center that day with my fist clenched and my jaw locked so tight I gave myself a headache. Camille wasn't just keeping them from me, she was rewriting who I was in their minds. And I didn't know how to stop her. I tried to fight back. I scraped together enough money for a lawyer, well, technically, a court-appointed one. He showed up late to every hearing, flipped through my case file like it was homework he'd forgotten to do, and once even called me Michael in court. Camille's lawyer, Silas Vaughn, ripped me to shreds with a smile. He knew how to frame every weakness as a character flaw. Every delay in paperwork? Irresponsible. Every emotional plea? Manipulative. The man was a cobra with a license to practice law. And Camille? She sat in court with tears that always arrived on time. She wore soft sweaters, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look fragile. The court bought it every time. She talked about the emotional damage I'd caused, the recovery process she and the kids were going through. I wanted to scream, but screaming would only prove their point. So I started therapy. Not because a judge told me to, but because I was drowning. I found a low-cost clinic that offered sessions on a sliding scale. The first time I sat across from Dr. Penner, I didn't say a word for 10 minutes. I just stared at a dying plant on the windowsill and clenched my jaw. When I finally spoke, it wasn't eloquent. "I don't know who I am anymore," I said. "Everything I built is gone." She didn't offer cheap comfort. She just nodded and said, "Then let's find out who you are now." I started journaling, writing letters to Ari and Jonas I'd never sent, pouring my rage onto the page. I filled notebooks with every memory, every injustice, every silent scream. It didn't fix anything, but it gave me something to hold on to. At night, I'd head to a park near the edge of town, find the empty basketball court, and hit a punching bag I'd hung from the hoop. I boxed until my arms went numb. I didn't know if I was training or just trying to feel something besides helplessness. The one thing I kept with me, no matter where I went, was a picture of the kids. Taken on a sunny Saturday at the zoo, just months before everything imploded. Ari had cotton candy on her cheek. Jonas wore a T-Rex hoodie. Camille had taken the photo. That irony wasn't lost on me. Sometimes, when it all felt like too much, I'd pull out that photo and whisper, "Just survive, Marcus. Survive now. Win later." I didn't know how. I didn't have a plan. But I wasn't going to let this version of me, the broken, erased, quiet version, be the one my kids remembered. Not forever. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing special about that day, just heat, sweat, and the familiar ache of labor that paid too little and drained too much. I'd been doing some landscaping work for a condo complex. Long day, trimming hedges in the humidity, my shirt soaked through, knees aching, knuckles scraped raw. When it wrapped, I stopped at the corner store for a bottle of Gatorade. As I stood in line, I saw the scratch-offs and lotto slips near the register. Habit made me grab one. Just a quick pick. I'd been doing it on and off for years, a quiet superstition left over from better days. At one power pick, I told the clerk, passing over a crumpled 20. He handed me the slip, and I barely looked at it. Just shoved it in my wallet with the receipt. I went back to Tarek's garage, showered with a hose in the yard, ate some leftover pasta, and fell asleep early with the fan humming beside me. I didn't think about the ticket again until days later, when I was cleaning out my wallet, tossing receipts and old gas station punch cards. That's when I saw it, bent at the corner, the numbers printed in fading ink. I pulled it out on a whim, sat down on the cot, and checked the numbers online. 6, 13, 25, 38, 42, and the Powerball, 11. I looked again, looked harder, opened another website. Same numbers. I sat there for 10 full minutes, unable to move. My first thought wasn't celebration, it was disbelief. This couldn't be real. This was some scam. The kind where you think you won, and then the fine print screws you. I called the number on the back of the ticket. I verified it twice, 3 times, once while pacing up and down the driveway in a daze. It was real. $5 million. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even smile. I just stood there in the dark, holding that thin slip of paper like it was radioactive. $5 million. After everything. After being stripped of everything. After losing my name, my kids, my home. And now this. I didn't tell anyone. Not Tarek, not my sister, no one. I knew the second I opened my mouth, it would all change. People don't look at you the same when you have money. They see a target. They see leverage. I cashed in the ticket anonymously, opting for a payout that would hit in installments. I kept everything under wraps, transferred the funds into a trust through a lawyer I found online, Renzo Phelps. He was loud, aggressive, and smart as hell. He specialized in reputation rehabilitation and personal legal overhauls. On our first call, he said, "Let me guess, someone burned you bad, and now you're ready to stop playing nice." I said, exactly. With his help, I built a new identity financially and personally. We opened new accounts, set up a shell company, and created a small LLC under my name for business purposes. I moved into a townhouse across town, nothing flashy, just enough space to breathe without being seen. I bought clothes that fit, good shoes, a mattress that didn't dig into my back like the cot had. I slept with the doors locked, the blinds drawn, and no one knew where I was. It was the first time in a long time that I felt in control. I got a new phone, new number. I didn't reach out to Camille. Didn't contact my kids, not yet. I wanted to, God, I wanted to. But not as the broken man sleeping in a garage. I wanted them to see me as something solid, stable, someone who had survived the fire and come out forged, not charred. Renzo started combing through the legal wreckage of my life. He found inconsistencies in the restraining order, issues with the custody filing. They cut corners, he told me. They thought you'd stay down. Lucky for us, now you can afford to push back. I also hired a financial advisor, a quiet woman named Patrice who never asked questions beyond what was necessary. She helped me understand the difference between wealth and power. You've got the first, she said. Now let's make sure you get the second without blowing it. Every move I made was deliberate, quiet, strategic. I enrolled in self-defense classes. Went back to therapy, this time with someone who specialized in trauma recovery for men. I started writing again, but now I wasn't journaling pain, I was mapping my comeback. I listed my goals like battle plans. Get the kids back. Clear my name. Make Camille answer for what she did. Reclaim my life. I still carried the picture of Ari and Jonas, but now, instead of just whispering survive, I added a new line, reclaim. Rebuild. Rise. I walk different now. Talk different. Not louder. Just steadier. The weight I'd carried for 6 months hadn't vanished, but I was stronger now, not crumbling under it. I was reshaped. The lottery didn't fix everything. It didn't give me back those stolen moments with my kids. It didn't erase the lies Camille poured into the world. But it gave me a tool, a chance. And I was done wasting chances. This time, I was going to play smart. And no one, especially not Camille, would see me coming. It was a Wednesday when she showed up. I remember because I had just finished a call with Patrice about setting up a trust fund for the kids, and the sun was low, spilling gold across the front of the townhouse. I was in sweatpants, barefoot, halfway through reheating leftover stir-fry. Then came the knock. Not frantic. Just 3 casual raps, like someone stopping by for a favor. I looked through the peephole and froze. Camille. Her hair was pinned back the way she wore it when she was trying to look soft. She had a pie in her hands. Of all things, a damn pie. Cherry, if I had to guess by the red glass dish. For a second, I didn't move. I half convinced myself I was hallucinating. Then she shifted her weight, and I saw it. Not regret. Not fear. Strategy. I opened the door slowly. How did you find me? Her smile faltered. Hi, Marcus. I didn't answer. I just leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. She glanced around, eyes scanning the porch like she expected backup. You look good. You need something? I asked flatly. She hesitated. I came to apologize. I stared at her. That why you brought a pie? Guilt bakes well now. She had the nerve to look offended. Can I come in? No. Her mouth pressed into a line. Look, I know I hurt you. I was confused, Marcus. Deja kept feeding me things, screenshots, telling me you were cheating. Stop. My voice dropped low. You don't get to come here, uninvited, and start rewriting the past like it was a misunderstanding. You lied. You destroyed me. That wasn't confusion, Camille. That was war. Her hands trembled around the pie dish. I was scared. I thought I was protecting the kids. I thought. Protecting them from what? A father who tucked them in every night? Who worked 60-hour weeks to keep the lights on while you played freelance photographer in yoga pants and avocado toast? Save it. She looked stunned. Maybe she wasn't used to this version of me, the one who didn't flinch, didn't beg, didn't break. Then she did what Camille always did when a door started closing, she wedged her foot in it. I heard you won the lottery, she said, voice suddenly slick, like butter melting over a trap. Word got around. There it was. Did it? I replied calmly. She tilted her head. You're still legally my husband, Marcus. I gave her a slow, deliberate nod. Technically, not emotionally, not spiritually, not in any way that counts. But legally, she repeated, which means if you acquired wealth during this separation. Her eyes lit up like a slot machine hitting 777s. I saw it then, plain as day, the reason for the pie, the soft voice, the practiced tears in the corners of her eyes. She didn't come for redemption. She came for money. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. So that's what this is. I'm entitled to half, she said, bolder now, stepping forward like I might invite her in any second. And I filed the paperwork today. You'll be hearing from Silas. I laughed. It came out harsher than I expected. You're still using him? After everything? She blinked. What do you mean? I mean, it's impressive how loyal you are. To the lawyer who helped you fake text and steal my kids. She went pale. That made me curious. Did she know I knew? Or was she just scared I'd found out? I'm sorry, she said again, but now it sounded hollow. You're not sorry. You're desperate. Her voice wobbled, almost like she wanted to cry. You think this was easy for me? I had to raise them alone, deal with the judgment, the loneliness. You chose all of that. I cut in. You picked the route. You burned the map. We stood there in silence, the air thick with old resentment. Then I stepped back. Good luck, Camille. Really? But don't ever show up unannounced again. I closed the door. She didn't knock again. Just stood there a minute before walking away, the pie still in her hands. The next day, the court summons arrived, petition for alimony and a legal claim for half of the lottery winnings, filed retroactively under community property. Renzo laughed when I showed him the documents. She really thinks she can play this long game with amateur tools, he said, shaking his head. Let her come. Let her try. She's still dangerous, I said. Yes, he agreed. But now so are you. That night, I sat in my living room, lights dimmed, the smell of the cherry pie still lingering from where I'd thrown it in the trash. I opened my journal and wrote just 2 lines. She thinks it's about the money. She has no idea what's coming. When you've been lied to, torn apart, and dragged through hell, there's a moment where your pain turns. Not to peace, not to forgiveness, but to purpose. Camille's visit had lit that fire in me. Not just because she was after money, not just because she was smug enough to show up with a pie, but because she thought I would still fold. That I was the same broken man she kicked out and erased. That was her mistake. I handed the court papers to Renzo, who took one look and smirked like he'd been waiting for this exact play. "Let her come," he said, tossing them onto his desk. "She just opened the door we needed." Renzo didn't waste time. That same afternoon, he made the call that changed everything. "There's someone I want you to meet," he told me. Simone Drax. Former cop, private investigator, zero tolerance for bullshit. I met Simone at a diner downtown. She walked in wearing jeans, a leather jacket, and a steel-cold look in her eye like she could see straight through lies. "Marcus Bell," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I've heard a lot about you. I'm guessing not the flattering kind." She didn't smile. "That's why I'm here." Over coffee and a notepad, I gave her everything, what Camille had accused me of, the texts, the court drama, even the visit with the pie. I told her about Silas Vaughn, the suspiciously timed evidence, the restraining order that never felt fully legal. She listened, nodded, and when I finished, she flipped the notebook closed and said, "Give me 2 weeks." She didn't need to. Within days, she was texting Renzo and me screenshots, audio clips, metadata dumps. Simone didn't just dig, she unearthed an entire graveyard of deception. First bombshell? Camille had been having an affair for 3 years. The man? Silas Vaughn. Yeah, her lawyer. That alone knocked the breath out of me. But Simone didn't stop there. She found deleted text messages and photos hidden behind encrypted folders on old social media accounts. There were pictures of them at hotels, beach weekends, even at our neighborhood's 4th of July event, standing just out of frame while I was grilling hot dogs for the kids. But the nail in the coffin? A voice note. Camille talking to her cousin Deja, clear as day, laughing. I had to do it. Marcus would have taken everything in a normal divorce. This way I got the house, the kids, and sympathy. It was a necessary evil. Necessary evil. I played that recording so many times the battery on my phone gave up. Simone also tracked down a series of payments, small, consistent transfers from Camille's joint account with me to a private one she opened months before filing for divorce. The recipient? Silas. Labeled under things like consulting, legal review, and my favorite, therapy. She was paying him to fake a crisis, Simone said over the phone. This whole thing was orchestrated. Fabricated. And guess what? I'm still not done. Renzo was nearly giddy. This is gold, he said, sifting through the files like a man unwrapping a treasure chest. We've got criminal fraud, legal malpractice, perjury. Hell, we could charge for emotional damages at this point. But I didn't care about revenge, not really. What I wanted was justice. I wanted to clear my name, to show Ari and Jonas that their father wasn't the monster Camille made me out to be, that I had never walked away. I'd been pushed out. Still, I couldn't deny the deep, burning satisfaction that came with each new piece of evidence Simone uncovered. For months, I lived with the weight of a narrative I hadn't written. Now, finally, I had proof it was fiction. And we weren't done yet. Simone found more, deleted messages between Camille and Deja where they joked about milking Marcus dry, about how easy it was to manipulate the system. Camille had even saved drafts of fake messages she never sent, just in case she needed to manufacture more proof. Screenshots of Silas coaching her on how to cry on the stand. It was all there. In black and white. I sat with Renzo in his office, the table littered with printouts, a whiteboard behind him filled with names, dates, and arrows. This is your redemption arc, he said. They built their castle on sand, Marcus. You built your comeback on stone. What happens next? I asked. Renzo leaned back, laced his fingers. We file motions. We go back to court. But this time, we're not on defense. I looked down at a photo Simone had printed, Camille and Silas kissing in a hotel lobby. She looked happy, carefree, like none of this had consequences. I traced my finger over the image and said quietly, it's time she learned what consequences feel like. I left the office that day with a thumb drive full of evidence and a fire in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Not rage. Not grief. Power. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't surviving anymore. I was fighting back. Courtrooms are funny places. Cold, sterile, but always full of heat. Not from temperature. No, it's from tension, pride, and the weight of everything people carry in under their clothes and behind their eyes. I walked in that morning not as the man Camille had tried to destroy, but as the man who had survived it. The man with proof. The man with a team. Renzo adjusted his tie beside me like he was preparing for war, which in truth, he was. Across the room, Camille sat in a navy dress and kitten heels, her face soft and hair pinned like she was heading to brunch. And beside her, like always, was Silas Vaughn, suit crisp, expression smug, as if the months of deceit we had uncovered were a minor inconvenience, not a crumbling fortress. They didn't look worried. That amused me, because they should have been terrified. Camille had filed for alimony and a share of the lottery winnings. Her argument? That I came into the money while we were still legally married. That she had sacrificed years of her life for my stability. That she deserved to benefit from our shared history. Renzo leaned in as we Saturday let them talk. When it's our turn, we gut the whole operation. The judge entered stern, no nonsense. I watched her eyes dart between the players in the room. When she looked at Camille, I saw a flicker of sympathy. When she looked at me, just neutrality. That was fine. All we needed was a clean shot. Camille went first. She took the stand with a tissue already in hand, voice shaking just enough to seem credible. She painted a picture of a man who had abandoned his family, struck gold, and left them behind. Claimed she couldn't afford proper schooling for the kids. Said I'd cut off communication and compassion. She wept when she said she'd had to sell jewelry just to afford groceries. I nearly laughed. Renzo had warned me, don't react. Let her perform. Then Silas took over. With his polished tone and sharp suit, he talked about community assets, financial entitlement, and emotional labor. He referenced case law, cited obscure precedents, and when he finished, Camille dabbed her eyes like she'd just survived a battlefield. Then it was our turn. Renzo didn't stride to the front, he strolled. Calm, deliberate, almost casual. He introduced me, then began gently peeling away Camille's image, layer by layer. He started with the timeline. The supposed sacrifices. The emotional labor. He showed spreadsheets, transaction histories, income gaps. He proved I was the sole earner for most of the marriage, that Camille hadn't worked more than 10 hours a week since Jonas was born. Then he shifted to the photos. Your Honor, he said, lifting the first printout, this is Camille Bell on a weekend retreat with Silas Vaughn. Location timestamped. Hotel expenses charged to a private joint account opened 6 months prior to the divorce filing. This account, will later show, received bi-weekly transfers from Camille's primary checking funds Marcus Bell never had access to. Camille stiffened. Silas adjusted his tie, but his jaw was twitching now. Renzo continued, methodical. He played the voice notes, the one where Camille called her actions a necessary evil. The one where she laughed with Deja about ruining Marcus to get free. The room changed. The air changed. Then came Simone. She took the stand in a dark blazer, no nonsense and clear. She explained how she recovered deleted data, outlined the timeline of the affair, and explained how Camille and Silas had built an elaborate ruse to fabricate infidelity on my part. When she played the voice clip, Camille whispering, "We'll drag him for a year, then settle. I just want the money and I want him humiliated." I didn't look at Camille. I didn't have to. The courtroom did. The judge didn't speak much during the entire presentation, but her posture sharpened. Her pen paused on the page, her gaze zeroed in on Silas like she just smelled something rotting. Renzo didn't need to yell or posture. He just told the truth, laid it out in layers, each one building on the last until there was no version of Camille's story that held weight. By the end of the day, her tissue was gone. Her hands clenched. Her tears, absent. And for once, Silas didn't smirk. We wrapped the day quietly, the courtroom hushed and tense. The judge called an emergency recess, saying she needed time to review new evidence. Her voice was clipped, but there was no mistaking it. Something had shifted. Outside, I stood on the courthouse steps with Renzo and Simone. Reporters weren't there. No flashing cameras. But I didn't need headlines. "I think that went well," Renzo said, dryly. Simone lit a cigarette and exhaled. "She's cornered. Next time, she might try to cry again, but it won't matter." I looked up at the sky. Clouds overhead, but light trying to cut through. "She spent a year trying to destroy me," I said quietly. "Now she'll learn what it feels like to be exposed." Renzo nodded. "And this is only the beginning." I thought the last hearing would be the apex, the tipping point where Camille's lies finally caught up with her. But Renzo, he had other plans. "You don't just win cases like this, Marcus," he told me. "You dismantle them piece by piece until there's nothing left to argue with." So when he said, "We're calling one more witness," I didn't argue. I just watched as he made a call that would flip everything. That next day in court, there was a different kind of buzz. Camille sat stiffly, her jaw tight. No more tears, no more tissue. Silas didn't look at me, didn't speak to anyone. His arrogance had cracked, replaced with something sharper. Paranoia, maybe. The judge sat straighter than usual, pen in hand, lips pressed thin. The tension in the room felt surgical. Renzo stood. "Your Honor," The defense would like to submit testimony from a new witness via sworn deposition. Judge Malcolm Eldridge, retired family court judge. Camille's had jerked toward us. Silas turned red. The court accepts the submission, the judge said cautiously. Proceed. Renzo played the recording on a small speaker. Eldridge's voice came through, steady and authoritative. After reviewing the initial restraining order filed by Camille Bell, I noted procedural inconsistencies, namely the absence of police reports, the lack of witness corroboration, and an abnormal approval turnaround. Further, upon analysis by digital forensics, the abuse report she submitted contains metadata showing it was altered multiple times before filing. The room stayed silent, but I felt the shift like a tremor beneath my feet. This wasn't just about false accusations anymore. It was about systemic manipulation, and someone in Camille's corner had helped her push it through. Additionally, Eldridge continued, the emergency custody decision was made without proper evaluation. No home visit, no psychological assessment of the father. Based on these findings, I believe the order was issued under irregular, possibly unethical, circumstances. The judge paused the playback, eyes narrowed. Is the implication that the original order was not just flawed, but potentially fraudulent? Yes, Your Honor, Renzo said without hesitation. And we're prepared to submit the digital forensic report. Silas stood, his voice strained. Objection. This is conjecture. We weren't given notice of this witness. The judge cut him off. You'll have time to respond, Mr. Vaughn. Sit down. I watched Silas sit, his face pale now. Camille leaned toward him, whispering furiously. He didn't reply. Then Renzo stood again. And now, Your Honor, one final piece of evidence. He tapped the screen. A new audio file began to play. The quality wasn't perfect, but the voices were unmistakable. Camille and Silas. A coffee shop, caught during a meeting Simone had monitored discreetly. Simone had planted a microphone on the table by pretending to forget her purse. Camille's voice, clear as glass. We'll drag him for a year, then settle. I just want the money and I want him humiliated. Silas, annoyed, you're pushing too far. If this comes out. It won't, Camille snapped. He doesn't have the money to fight back. I looked at the judge. Her face didn't move, but her fingers drummed slowly on the bench. Renzo clicked the file off and let the silence speak for itself. When the judge finally did speak, her voice was lower than usual. We're going to take a recess. This court will reconvene tomorrow for closing remarks and a final decision. She stood and walked out without waiting for anyone else to move. Camille turned in her seat and looked at me, no longer defiant, no longer smug, just rattled. Her lips parted like she might say something, but I didn't give her the chance. I stood and left. Outside, the sky was thick with storm clouds, and the wind picked up. I walked with Renzo and Simone to the courthouse steps, my head buzzing. She's finished, Simone said flatly. She'll try to spin, Renzo added. Play the victim again. But it won't work this time. I nodded but said nothing. My mind was spinning with all the versions of my life that could have been. If I hadn't picked up that lottery ticket, if I hadn't met Renzo, if Simone hadn't done what she did, would I still be in that garage? Still punching the air in the dark, praying someone believed me? That night, I sat alone in my living room, no music, no distractions. I pulled out my old journal, the one filled with angry scribbles, tear-stained entries, unanswered prayers, and turned to a blank page. I wrote one sentence. This is what the truth sounds like when it finally roars. Then I closed the book, leaned back, and let myself breathe. Tomorrow would be the final blow. But tonight, I finally felt free. Court felt different that morning. Like the building itself knew the story had changed. There was no buzz in the air, no whispering, no tension clinging to the walls, just a thick silence, the kind that settles when the truth has already been spoken and everyone is just waiting for the consequences to land. Camille walked in alone this time. Silas was nowhere to be seen. Her steps were slower, her blouse wrinkled at the sleeves, like she hadn't slept or just didn't care anymore. The woman who used to own every room with a smirk and a well-timed tear now looked smaller somehow, like her own mask was starting to smother her. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat in my seat, eyes steady, hands clasped, waiting. The judge entered and the room rose. She gave no pleasantries, no drawn-out commentary. She went straight to the point. In light of the newly submitted evidence, including audio recordings, sworn depositions, and corroborated digital records, the court has found multiple instances of fraud, perjury, and deliberate manipulation of legal processes initiated by Mrs. Camille Bell. The words landed like slow, rolling thunder. Camille didn't flinch. She sat there, unmoving, staring straight ahead as if detaching from her own downfall. The request for alimony is denied. The claim to shared lottery winnings is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, the petitioner, Mrs. Bell, is ordered to pay the respondent's full legal fees in addition to a punitive fine for filing fraudulent motions in family court. The judge paused, then looked directly at Camille. You abused this court's trust. You crafted a narrative not only to dismantle your ex-husband's reputation, but to strategically profit from his ruin. That is not only unethical, it is criminal in nature. You are fortunate the respondent has chosen not to pursue charges at this time. Camille's eyes flicked to me for the first time. A silent question. A plea. I didn't look away. The judge continued. As for the matter of custody, given the manipulation, the previously fabricated claims of emotional neglect, and the recent findings of false evidence used to obtain the initial order, this court is reversing the prior custody ruling. Full legal and physical custody of Ari and Jonas Bell is hereby granted to Mr. Marcus Bell. My breath caught, but I didn't move. I heard the words, understood them, but I couldn't process them all at once. Full custody. My kids. Home. The judge's voice steadied. Mrs. Bell is granted supervised visitation, contingent upon enrollment and completion of a 12-week parenting and psychological rehabilitation program. Until that requirement is met, visitation remains at the court's discretion. Renzo's hand gripped my shoulder, firm, solid. Steady. You did it, he whispered. Camille finally stood. She didn't cry. She didn't protest. She just picked up her bag and walked out of the courtroom like someone whose body remembered confidence, but whose mind had finally realized the game was over. No more lies. No more staged tears. No more hiding behind a lawyer's polished mouth. She was alone. Silas was disbarred that same week. The audio Simone recorded, combined with the payment trail and the obvious breach of ethics, was more than enough. The Bar Association didn't even fight it. They issued a suspension within 48 hours, followed by a permanent revocation. He didn't bother contesting it. Word was he'd already cleared out his office. As for Camille, she lost more than the case. The house was sold within a month to cover the fines and legal costs. She moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. Friends stopped calling. Family grew distant. The story had shifted too far for even her best spin to work. She'd built a narrative of betrayal, painted herself the victim. But now the truth was public, and no one wanted to stand too close to the ashes. I didn't celebrate. Not outwardly. I didn't throw a party or blast music or post anything online. But the first night I had the kids back, really back. I made tacos, just like we used to. Ari helped chop lettuce. Jonas set the table, carefully placing napkins at every spot. When we sat down, they were quiet. Awkward. Unsure. And then Jonas asked, "Do we have to go back tomorrow?" I shook my head. "No, buddy. You're home now." Ari watched me for a long moment. "Mom said you didn't want us." "I always wanted you," I said softly. "I just couldn't get to you." But I never stopped trying. We ate in silence for a while after that, but it was a different kind of silence. Not full of fear or confusion, but healing. Like the beginning of trust, unsure but real. Over the next few weeks, we rebuilt slowly. Therapy, game nights, morning routines. They didn't talk about Camille much, and I didn't push. I figured they'd ask when they were ready. When the final paperwork arrived, full custody confirmed, case closed, I sat on the porch by the lake, watching the sun dip low. I pulled the old family photo out of my wallet, the one taken before everything fell apart. Then I pulled out the new one. Me, Ari, and Jonas by the water, all three of us laughing. I slid the old photo behind the new one, because the past had its place. But this was the future. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with trumpets or crashing waves. It comes quietly, like morning light slipping through a curtain, like laughter that returns when you're not looking for it. That's how it began for me, and for Ari and Jonas. No big declarations, just small moments that slowly, gently stitched something back together. We moved into a modest house by the lake. Nothing flashy, but full of calm. The kind of place where the wind made music with the trees and frogs sang at dusk. The kids had their own rooms again, painted their walls however they wanted. Jonas chose dinosaurs. Ari picked constellations and glow-in-the-dark stars. I let them choose new furniture, new sheets, new lamps. I wanted them to feel like they weren't stepping into a stranger's house, but coming home. The first few weeks were hard, I won't lie. They were angry, especially Ari. She didn't yell much. She just shut down. Eyes that didn't meet mine, shoulders pulled in. She didn't trust me yet, and I didn't blame her. Jonas was more confused than mad. He followed her lead, watching me closely as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. But I didn't push. I woke them up for school. I packed lunches. I made breakfast, even if they didn't eat much at first. I showed up, every day, with quiet hands and open arms. Because after everything, I knew consistency was the only answer. Therapy helped. We each had our own sessions, and then we started family counseling. Ari barely spoke the first 2 times. Then one day, out of nowhere, she asked the therapist, "Why did my mom lie?" No one had prepped her for it. She just said it. I looked at her, surprised, and saw something I hadn't seen in months. Curiosity instead of withdrawal. That was the beginning of her coming back to me. Taco nights became a ritual again. Jonas started drawing again, little comics with absurd characters. One of them was a superhero dad with a cape and a lawnmower. He gave it to me, shyly, one Friday night. I put it on the fridge like it was framed gold. We went on walks every Saturday, sometimes to the lake, sometimes just around the neighborhood. I didn't try to force conversation. I let the air do the talking. Slowly, they started filling the space, pointing out birds, telling me about their classmates, asking questions that had nothing to do with court or pain or the past. Just kid stuff. Normal stuff. Camille tried to appeal once. Filed a request to revisit visitation terms. The court denied her without hesitation. Her court-mandated therapy and parenting classes were still incomplete. And honestly, the kids didn't ask about her much. When they did, I answered honestly but gently. "Your mom's working on herself," I'd say. "When she's ready, and the court says it's safe, you'll have the chance to talk to her if you want to." I never spoke badly about her in front of them. That was a line I refused to cross. I wouldn't become what I'd been accused of being. I wouldn't poison their memories or use their love as a weapon. They deserved the truth, but they also deserved space to make sense of it themselves. As for me, I used a portion of the lottery winnings to start something that felt bigger than myself. I called it the Hands Clean Foundation, a nonprofit for wrongfully accused parents, especially fathers who had been erased from their children's lives without cause. I built a team of advocates, counselors, and legal advisors. We took on pro bono cases, held workshops, shared resources with men who had been silenced and shamed. It gave me purpose, something I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't about revenge or justice anymore. It was about creating change. Making sure what happened to me didn't happen to someone else who couldn't afford a Renzo or find a Simone. I stayed off social media. I didn't broadcast my story, didn't gloat. The people who needed to know, knew. The people who mattered were under my roof, sleeping in their own beds, waking up to pancakes on Sunday morning. That was enough. Some nights, after the kids went to bed, I'd sit by the lake with a cup of coffee, listen to the water, let my mind rest. Sometimes I thought about Camille, not with anger, but with detachment. She made her choices. She built the fire that burned everything down. And then she tried to climb out of the ashes and take what she hadn't earned. But I didn't have to carry her anymore. That weight was gone. I found the old photo once, tucked in the back of my wallet. The one from before, when I still believed everything was good and safe and permanent. I stared at it for a while. Then I pulled out the new one. Me and the kids, by the lake. Hair messy, eyes crinkled, real smiles. I taped the new photo over the old one. Not to erase the past, but to make peace with it. 12 years had meant nothing to Camille. But to me, they were the reason I fought so hard to start over. And now? Now it's real.